Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 19, Text 19, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Asmin eva varshe purushaya labdha janmabhi shukla. Okay. What is that? Lohita Krishna varnena swarabdhena karmana divyamanusha narakagateyo bhavya atmano Anupurvirna saravahyeva sarveshang vidhiyante yatha varna vidhanam apavargai chapi bhavati apavargas chapi bhavati. Translation: the people who take birth in this tract of land, this is referring to Bharatavarsha. The people who take birth in this tract of land are divided according to the qualities of material nature, the modes of goodness, sattva-gun, passion, rajoguna, and ignorance, tamaguna. Some of them are born as exalted personalities, some are ordinary human beings, and some are extremely abominable. For in Bharatavarsha one takes birth exactly according to one's past karma. If one's position is ascertained by a bona fide spiritual master and one is properly trained to engage in the service of Lord Vishnu according to the four social divisions, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, and the four spiritual divisions, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha and Sannyas, one's life becomes perfect. Purport: for further information, one should refer to Bhagavad-gita, chapter 14, text 18, and chapter 18, texts 42 to 45. Srila Ramanujacharya writes in his book, Vedanta Sangraha, Evang vidha para bhakti swarupa jnana visheshas yotpadaka puravokta hara hara upachiyamana jnana purvaka karmanugrihita bhakti yoga eva yathoktam bhagavata parasharena varnashrameti nikhila jagad udharan ayavan itale vatirnam parabrahma bhuta purusho tamasvayam etad uktavan Swakarma niratas siddhing yata vindati tat shrunu yata pravritir bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam swakarmana tamabhyacha siddhing vindati mahanavaha. The translation is not given for all of this. There's some Gita shlokas of that. It's from what I can understand, it's this quotation is similar to the verse of the Bhagavatam. That's not the verse; it's actually Gadya prose that's just been given. These shlokas from Bhagavatam are given about how one can achieve from Bhagavad-gita are given about how one can achieve the perfection of life by acting according to Varnashram and worshipping Krishna. And the verse from Vishnu Purana concerning this is also alluded to, and the purport goes on like that. It gives the verse. Quoting from the Vishnu Purana, the great sage Parashara Muni has recommended Varnashramaccharavata Purushena Paraf Puman Vishnura Radhyate Panta Nanya Tatoshakarnam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped by the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of Varna and Ashrama. There is no other way to satisfy the Lord. Unquote. In the land of Bharatavarsha, the institution of Varnashram Dharma may be easily adopted. At the present moment, certain demoniac sections of the population of Bharatavarsha are disregarding the system of Varnashram Dharma, because there is no institution to teach people how to become Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, or Brahmacharis, Grihastas, Vanaprasthas and Sannyasis. These demons want a classless society. This is resulting in chaotic conditions. In the name of secular government, unqualified people are taking the supreme governmental posts. No one is being trained to act according to the principles of Varnashram Dharma, and thus people are becoming increasingly degraded and are heading in the direction of animal life. The real aim of life is liberation, but unfortunately the opportunity for liberation is being denied to people in general, and therefore their human lives are being spoiled. The Krishna consciousness movement, however, is being propagated all over the world to re-establish the Varnashram Dharma system and thus save human society from gliding down to hellish life. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurinmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Shreshtham Manamapi Shaktiputram Atra Surupam Rupam Tasya Gajamurapuring Maturim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaramaho Radhika Madhavasham Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Ataf Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakan Vitaksha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. This chapter of Bhagavatam is titled The Island of Jambudvip, and Bharata is repeatedly referred to in here. Bharata, sometimes refers to the whole planet of Earth, and sometimes to the land that is now known as Bharata. India is the English name for the country. If you see the Indian stamp, it'll have India written on it in English and Bharata in what is called Devanagari script, or that script which is associated with Hindi language. So what exactly are the boundaries of that? Well, as Srila Prabhupada said, that used to be all the world, and it's gradually shrunk. In the time of the Mahabharata war, we find that, at least from what is now Afghanistan, the fighters were coming, that Gandhari, the wife of Dhritarashtra, she's from the city, second most famous city in Afghanistan, Kandahar. Kandahar, is it? Kandahar, yeah. And Shakuni, her uncle, was from there, and also the king of Cambodia, that's Kampuchea, now known as Kampuchea. He was also, and many of the places near to India, what is now the country known as India, have names that suggest the Vedic heritage, just like Burma is, in Sanskritam, is Brahmadesh. Siam is said to be Shamadesh, that's Thailand, now known as Thailand. And Malaya, that is Sanskrit term also. Malayasyeva chandanam, that word comes in the Bhagavatam. Then there are so many, just like Pakistan, they gave the Muslim country, but they gave the name Stan, which is means place. It's directly from Sanskrit. And Afghanistan, and then we have Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, and way up in Europe, in Russia, there's one republic in the Russian Federation. One of them is Tatarstan. So this all suggests the Vedic Hare Krishna. The present land of India is what are the boundaries of that? That is disputed also. So sometimes Bharat is taken to mean the whole planet, and sometimes the relatively small country that is now known as India, plus that which was until recently known as India, that includes what is now Pakistan and Bangladesh also, and Nepal could also be included in that. Here in the verse, in the text, it's stated that people born in this tract of land, they take birth exactly according to one's past karma. So what I understand from this is just like, how many days ago? 2 days ago? 3 days ago? I was telling the story of Bali Maharaj's previous life, how he was very sinful, but when he went to Yamaraj, he asked if he could enjoy the results of his pious activities before he got the results of his sinful activities. And we find that similarly with Nriga Maharaj, the stories are in the Bhagavatam. He had the choice to suffer the results of his sinful activities first or his pious activities, and he chose to take the results of his sinful activities. So in other species of life, such as that of the lizard, that Nriga Maharaj entered, one in lower species of life, one is, and in the hellish planets, one is almost exclusively suffering in the results of sinful activities. And in the heavenly planets, one is almost exclusively enjoying the results of pious activities. But in the human life, on the earth planet, one gets a mixed bag. It's neither is one fully enjoying the results of pious activities nor suffering, but he gets whatever's left after previous births in heaven or hell, he gets life here. In this section of Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada discusses much about Bharata, referring to the specific land that is now known as Bharata, as India, and the piety of such people. And we find just before this, there's a list of rivers which are specifically in the present tract of land that is known as Bharata. Plus, some may be is Sindhu given it's the river Sindhu that is now in Pakistan. I don't see that it's given here anyway. But, so this particularly, that's interesting. Narmada and Reva. So, from the Bhagavatam itself, from this description of the rivers that are prominent, it's understood that this within the Earth planet, the particular area that is now known as Bharata is very special. Many sacred rivers are there, and particularly the Supreme Personality of Godhead has performed his pastimes there, as Krishna and Rama. They performed almost all their pastimes in that land. Vamana Dev, his main best known pastime, is there, and in India, in what is now called Gujarat, in Bhrigukach. And the whole culture is more favorable for Krishna consciousness than other parts of this planet. Srila Prabhupada often quoted from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions, Bharata bhumite hoilo marusha janmaja janma shata kari karo para upaka. One who has taken birth in the land of India, Srila Prabhupada translates this, as a human being should perfect his life, make his life successful. That means spiritually. In India today, people are very interested in making their lives successful materially, but that's not what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meant. Janma sartak, it means to make one's life successful. It can also mean to have lots of money, but that's not what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meant. And karo para upaka, to help others. And it's clear from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instruction that helping others doesn't mean opening hospitals and schools and things like this for mundane purposes for the body, but preaching Krishna consciousness. So, birth in India is very special, and Srila Prabhupada, he often used to say that he used to exhort Indians, why don't you take up Krishna consciousness very seriously? I am one Indian, he would say, and I have done so much. If others would also take it up, there could be a great effect. And he wanted anyone and everyone who would take it up, but he exhorted particularly Indians to take that up, because as we see now, Indians can very easily take to Krishna consciousness. At that time when Srila Prabhupada was preaching, not many Indian people were joining our movement in this, particularly not as full-time devotees, although in Mayapur quite a lot of Bangladeshi refugees joined. So they were coming for a mixture of maybe more material reasons, because you could imagine a refugee there in a difficult situation. Not that they were not inclined to Krishna consciousness, but they had many material needs also. So Srila Prabhupada particularly wanted that the educated class of people would join, but hardly anywhere at the time. Shortly after Srila Prabhupada left this world, then you could say a better class in the sense of more educated, cultured class started to join. And now our movement is predominantly, you could say, and probably in terms of the number of initiated devotees, I think there's no doubt that every year all over the world, if anyone was to take a census, then I would think almost certainly the majority of devotees getting initiated by gurus of ISKCON are from an Indian Hindu background. Sometimes that has caused some consternation that in the Western countries, actually the Shastric injunction is that one should not cross the sea. If one goes overseas, then one becomes fallen. I suppose that's because of mixing with people who are outside the Varnashram culture, and one is not able to, in places where the Varnashram culture isn't there, then you can't follow it, and if you can't follow Varnashram culture, then you can't progress in spiritual life. Then automatically you become outside the institution of varnashram. You become a chandal, something like this. That injunction is largely forgotten nowadays. Although recently, when one of the Madhva Sampradaya sannyasis went overseas, recently means 10 or 15 years ago, it was considered scandalous within his community, and there was some idea to ban him from worship of the deity there in Udupi, but that's all passed over now, and it's still not much favored, but it's just accepted as part of life. But even without going outside of India, the Indians are becoming fallen in so many ways, losing their culture, embracing Western culture. But still, the possibility we see is there to become Krishna conscious more. They can accept Krishna conscious more easily. We see that many Indians who come to the West, well, they don't come for spiritual life. And many of them, they become very westernized, which means very fallen from the spiritual point of view. And some of them see the Western way of life in its full naked debasement. In India, people, they can't believe how fallen the Western world is until they go there, and some who see that, they don't want to be like that, and then they take to their culture more strongly. And in our Krishna conscious movement, many are coming from Hindu background in England, Australia, America, Canada, all these places. So, yes, sometimes there's some consternation about that our movement's becoming overly Indian. That's not necessarily, it's not at all a bad thing. We want that everyone will come to Krishna consciousness, and if Indians come, of course, it should be welcome. This movement started off in the West with mostly, almost all Western members. Of course, we know we're all spirit soul, but we're talking in social terms, as Srila Prabhupada does, and as the Bhagavatam itself does here, in talking about people who take birth in different parts of the world. So we want that everyone take to Krishna consciousness, and at the present time mostly Indians are joining. That can be some cause for consternation if we neglect preaching to non-Indians or non-Hindus. That it's relatively easy in the West to preach to and bring in people from an Indian background, because they have that cultural background, and they're often much easier to deal with than people coming from a Western background, because people coming from an Indian background, they're already still, they have the culture to a large extent. They're mostly educated, responsible people, whereas many people, compared to Western people, they're, we can say they're, generally speaking, culturally superior. And they tend not to have so many psychological problems. And Hare Krishna. So, and it's very good for the Krishna consciousness movement that they join it, but that doesn't mean that we want that they join it. So, I don't think we should complain that so many Indian people are joining. Some people complain that our movement's becoming over-Indianized, but no one was complaining in the 1960s and 70s that, well, only hippies are joining. So, but the hippies went out, and the hippies who became devotees, they went out and preached to everyone. So the Indians who have taken to Krishna consciousness in America and other countries, they can also go out and preach to everyone. Vaisheshika Prabhu especially is spearheading this in America, that young or whatever Indians can go out at least at the weekend and distribute books to everyone. Adi Guru Prabhu yesterday, who's took to Krishna consciousness in India and is now here in America, told me in one city, probably Pittsburgh, where he's based, he has regular two Sunday programs, one for Indians and one for non-Indians. So that makes sense because people are from different cultural backgrounds, and Srila Prabhupada also approved that a separate, in Cleveland, Ohio, Srila Prabhupada approved that a separate center be there for black-bodied devotees. Did you know that? Heard of that before? And he gave Srila Prabhupada quoted, "Birds of a feather flock together." They can be together also. In Harrisburg, I saw, in Pennsylvania, when I went there. It's mostly Indian group, but they were preaching among the local people also, and quite a few Western people were coming also. So there may be some cultural differences, but Srila Prabhupada gave the analogy of andha pangu nyai, of the blind man and the lame man, and Srila Prabhupada applied it in a novel way. The analogy of the blind man and the lame man is that the blind man, he can't see where he's going. He may be physically strong, but he can't see where to go, whereas the lame man can see where to go, but he's not physically strong. So if the lame man climbs on the back of the blind man and gives directions, then they can both go to where they need to go. So Srila Prabhupada gave this analogy that the West is like a strong blind man, has got economic, technological and political strength, whereas India has got spiritual knowledge but is technologically lagging. Of course, in those days there was a bigger gap than there is nowadays. So Srila Prabhupada suggested that if the material strength of the West is combined with the spiritual vision of India, then in Krishna consciousness, that's the whole point, then the whole world can be benefited. There has been some resentment also against Indian devotees. Many came previously, and that's not very possible now due to tightening of immigration facilities. But there used to be many devotees from India would come to America and other Western countries and serve in temples, usually as pujaris and cooks. And after some time they'd get their green card, and then they'd be out of the temple and earning money. Not all of them. Some of them just stayed in the temple also, just like you see that in San Diego, what's his name? Lokajit. He's in the temple. And Srikant in New York, he's like the engine of the whole temple, and he cooks. cooks and sings, and he's very active. And of course he takes, as a grihasta, he sends money back to his family, but he could earn more if he went outside, but he doesn't like to. Some, or many did like that, and that has been not much appreciated by many devotees, that they appear to be very materialistic. But those who come, they do good service, and even if they go outside and earn money, in most cases, they're mostly Bengalis, in most cases they send money back to their families, and then they get land in Mayapur and build a house in Mayapur. So it's not that they're not devotees, or that they're earning money simply for sense enjoyment, but they're maybe using andapangunya in a different way. They're combining the facility of the Krishna consciousness movement with putting the material needs of their families, coming from poor backgrounds, they're putting it together. But then the material needs of their families, they also, generally they fulfill that in a Krishna conscious way by building a house in Mayapur for their family to live in. So maybe they don't have the same idealism as devotees that join in the West have, because they come usually in the West they come for the philosophy, and they're very committed. But there are pros and cons also, because many Western devotees, despite their idealism, at some point they fall into back into their old subcultural ways. Whereas, of course, we're speaking very generally here, but Indian devotees, even though they may not strive to go so high, but they tend to remain quite steady, and they go on chanting Hare Krishna throughout their life. And in many cases they've kept temples running on in times when no Western devotees were joining. So we don't want to make too much of a distinction. This is a Western devotee, this is an Indian devotee. All devotees are devotees. Although here in the Bhagavatam, in this section, there's some distinction is made, and sometimes that is practical. Some kind of distinction is made. Those who are from India, they have good opportunity. So on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's order, they should not be content simply with their own spiritual life, but should try to give that to others. One thing I always try to remember, even while I'm preaching, and most of my life I've been in India, while I'm preaching to Indians and telling them, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. But I always try to remember that persons born in India are from a much better cultural background than I'm from. It's only by Srila Prabhupada's mercy that I have any idea of Krishna at all. Whereas in India, even without Srila Prabhupada, people at least have some idea, culture of Krishna consciousness. Of course, without Prabhupada's mercy, then they tend to have mixed up ideas. But that culture is still going on. Srila Prabhupada and his movement have very much revived the culture of India. It was really going down. Vrindavan was, when I first went there, it was like a ramshackle place. The ashrams were run down. And now Vrindavan has become very wealthy because of the influx of devotees. Land has become very costly there. So this is all due to the inspiration that Srila Prabhupada gave. So anyway, there are some thoughts on Indians and non-Indians in Krishna consciousness. We're often devotees are concerned we're not preaching to the Americans, but when preaching to the Americans, it seems there also we mostly focus on white people. Or what about the Latinos and the black-bodied? They can also be devotees. Why focus only on the white people? And old people, young people, everyone can become Krishna conscious. So why not? There are also many people in America now from China, Vietnam, Korea, Japan, all these places. They're pretty tough, it seems. Is it? Difficult. In Japan, and it's been difficult all these years to bring people to Krishna consciousness. All those who come, they're very good. But it's really difficult to get people to come. I was in Thailand for some time also. It was difficult to get people to commit themselves. So America, the whole world's here. People from all over. There are many Iranians, and although they're from Muslim background, they're actually quite open to Krishna consciousness, it seems. So you can also preach to the whole world right in America, because students are from all over the world. So that's way to that. The Muslim barrier, we never really infiltrated the Muslim world in a big way. So one way might be to preach to Muslim students here. Just some ideas. All right, Hare Krishna. It's almost 8 o'clock, and I'm supposed to finish at 8 o'clock. And anyway, I'm more or less finished what I had to say there, unless there are any questions, comments, or anything else. Yeah.
Having separate programs for white-bodied devotees, it may give
You say white-bodied. You say white-bodied. Westerners, yeah. We tend to think of Indians and white-bodied. Why don't we think of all the others? Yellow-bodied, black-bodied, Latino, yeah.
Like black community is separate, Latino.
Yeah.
Having this program, we still say that spiritually they may progress, but don't you think it may take a little longer if they're not culturally mixed with Prabhupada?
There may be pros and cons of having separate programs for Indians and Westerners. There may be, yeah. But it's just like among Indians in general, if you quote a lot of Sanskrit, they'll appreciate that and they can understand it to a large extent. Just like if you say, Chartur Varnyang Maya Srishtam, then you can explain the 4 Varnas, and you don't, Maya by me, Srishtam, created. Whereas for people who don't speak Indian languages, it'll be very difficult for them to understand what you're talking about. And culturally, or you have a head start, no doubt, coming from an Indian background. Culturally and philosophically, and maybe different kinds of anarthas to be addressed also, because Hindus are generally attached to demigod worship, which is not generally a major issue among Westerners, unless they're associated with Hindus. So that's a major thing that has to be addressed. And even Mayavad, everyone all over the world is infected by it, but in a different way, you could say. More in a different way. Indians and non-Indians. In the non-Indians, they're affected by it in the New Age kind of way, and Indians by Indian gurus. Of course, these are generalizations. So there are some advantages also. And also, just like this This Carol, who we met in Orlando in the university, she said she'd been to the temple there and she didn't have a good experience because she saw the idols, which in Christianity you're not supposed to have, and she saw people bowing down and she didn't like that. Just 2 nights ago here also, that one man, he expressed his discomfort with seeing people bow down to humans, to myself. So, but that doesn't, I don't think that we shouldn't do these things because people might be discouraged by them. We should still do them. And we can explain as required. I've heard in at least one center they don't do Tulsi Arati and they don't bow down, I think, because they're trying to make it culturally accessible to Westerners. But then if you take everything out, there's nothing left. What are you going to give them? There's a commonly asked question among devotees, just like in an airport or a train station, if a sannyasi arrives, should the devotees bow down, as is the culture to do so? And I say, because Western people might think that's strange, or not only strange, but they may consider it objectionable. But I say, yeah, do it. Let them get used to it. Otherwise, they're never going to get used to it. It's just like when devotees first went on Harinam in the West, people, they were disturbed by it. They thought it was something very strange and objectionable. But gradually they got used to it. Now again, they need getting used to it.
A few years back, I bowed down to Ropa from outside parking lot. He was surprised. Even from an Indian, it's very rare to find these.
Yeah, he says very rare that well, some sannyasis tell others don't bow down in public. And in Udupi, this when he was in Pariyai, this Sugunendra Tirtha, he told us that when he's walking around in Udupi or in the temple or whatever, if people bow down to him, he knows they're ISKCON members, because no one else does. Even his own sampradaya people don't do it.
Yeah, I did to him. A couple of years back when we went to Udupi, I did to him, he was on park.
Yeah.
I did to him, he stopped and recognized. He stopped.
Yeah, yeah.
Then when I got up, only then he continued.
Yeah, he stopped to accept the obeisance, yeah.
Hare Krishna. Does anybody have any questions on the conference call? Yes, Mataji.
Oh.
Yes, Mataji, please ask. Maharaj is listening.
Okay, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yeah, the question is about preaching to people. Should we see them as souls or as the body? Do we want to get so much into bodily conscious distinguishing? Yeah, we see everyone as spirit soul, but at the same time we deal with people according to the socio-psycho-cultural disposition that they have. Just like I've spoke a lot here today about Indian devotees and Western devotees. Everyone is spirit soul, that we know. In Gita, Krishna says, Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavihastini shuni chaiva shvapake cha pandita samadarshinaha. That a learned person sees with equal vision a learned and humble brahmana, a Vidya vinaya sampanne, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater, but that doesn't mean that you treat them the same. You don't treat a dog the same way as you treat a learned and gentle brahmana. So similarly, for instance, if we're preaching, if you see someone who's dressed as a business person, nowadays generally businessman, then you'll generally approach them in a different mood than you would if you see someone who's a student or a hippie or a biker or whatever. Sometimes the businessmen during the week are bikers at the weekend. Living out their fantasies. So there are differences in the way we approach people. We want to give Krishna to them, Krishna consciousness, but we do so being cognizant of the attitudes they have, and the dress speaks a lot, and the body can speak a lot also. So, some differences there. And again, everyone is a spirit soul, but we don't try to preach to dogs and cats, because they're also spirit souls, but the only thing we can do for them is to chant Hare Krishna in their presence and give them some prasadam. You can't try and get them to get up. Well, there are some dogs that come to Mangalarti, but not many. Get them to chant their rounds. Pretty difficult for a dog. They don't have the voice box apparatus, but nor can they understand. That's the real point. They can't understand what is Krishna consciousness.